For those of you who are interested in how many people we have at this 11th OIS meeting, we have over 900. I was told 950 to 1,000 this morning when I myself was checking in. And if you're interested who's sitting next to you, you can see the breakdown on this graph. Basically, 1/3 private companies, 1/3 public, and about 20% clinicians and KOLs. We always start off with the drugs and the FDA, and this year there were 2 PMA approvals. Olopantadine and phenylephrine, phenylephrine being an older drug, olopantadine being a cyclodextrin reformulation of an existing agent. I'm most excited, I have to say, about what's sort of pending submissions and approvals. We have this year the first phase 3 results in gene therapy for the eye with Spark Therapeutics and their RPE65 treatment for related disorders. We have AbbVie with 2 positive phase 3 trials for non-infectious uveitis. And remember, we've had 3 failed phase 3s in that indication, so that's an impressive feat. And we have Shire that's planning to resubmit their dry eye package for lifitegrast, which I think will be the first since, if approved, will be the first since Restasis. We have Bausch & Lomb and Valiant with their nitric oxide modified prostaglandin agonist that had impressive phase 2 results, actually a little bit superior to latanoprost, and met their non-inferiority to timolol by press release. And we have ARI, which is the first completely new mechanism of action in glaucoma in over 15 years. And remember, AGIS has taught us that the pressure should be about 13 or 14 to get true and definitive protection over time, and you can't do that without lowering episcleral venous pressure, and this is the first agent to do that. So I think an important milestone. Additional milestones that we have coming up this year will be the combined phase 3 data for Ophthalmology, which should be toward the end of the year. This is the first combination product for wet AMD with the PDGF inhibitor and the VEGF inhibitor, which may, we hope, show disease modification as well with both the new vessels and fibrosis. We'll have data from AGTC and Biogen related to X-linked retinoschisis. This will be important validation for gene therapy in ophthalmology. They'll also perhaps have results with achromatopsia, so we'll be looking to see this with excitement. And we'll have this first sustained release delivery of a biologic with the latter trial, Genentech Foresight Vision 4, which may actually slip into the beginning of 2017, but I think this too will be very important. Remember, intraocular injections are very common. There are now over 22 million done worldwide. This rivals cataract procedures around the world, and yet people don't do them. As comfortable as they are with them, they don't do them as much as they should. Why do I say should? Here are the actual real-world use data from just one study. There are now several of these looking at bevacizumab and ranibizumab. Basically, the physicians are giving half as many injections as the protocol showed to be effective. And we know that less injections are less effective. Here's a nice plot of trials that plots injection frequency in that trial by line or letters gained. And you can see more injections closer to the protocol, you get more letters gained or prevented from loss. Essentially, if you follow the protocol, you can have up to 4 or 5 letters more gain in that trial. That's comparable to the add-on therapy we're seeing with some agents. So I think compliance is going to emerge as a very important metric. There is at least one point of scientific breakthrough or breakthrough science that I want to comment on because I think it's very exciting. There are now 2 papers in 2 of our most prestigious journals, Science and Nature, that show that a steroid eye drop can reverse cataracts in mice. Remember, cataracts are the most common cause of blindness worldwide. Over half of world blindness is related to cataract. And as I mentioned, 22 million cataract procedures, comparable only to intravitreal injections, obviously much more complex worldwide. So it's a big indication, big procedure, and important. Viewpoint Therapeutics is the one company that I'm aware of that is pursuing this approach. They have a proprietary sterol that prevents in fact reverses these protein aggregates that are in the lens and that we believe and know now give rise to these cataracts. And they've actually reversed the cataracts in mice. They're tracking toward their IND, and we'll see where that takes them in humans. I'm very optimistic. On the device side, again, back to the FDA, another active year. There have been 73 510K clearances and 4 PMA approvals. Of these 4 PMA approvals, I think the most noteworthy is the first PMA for presbyopia, the first corneal inlay, AcuFocus. This was a approved in April, and now there have been over 1,000 inlays placed. I have spoken with some of the physicians who are using this, and they seem very happy with it, and they've told me their patients are very happy with it. So I think a very welcome approval. There was another approval which was neither 510K nor PMA. It was a de novo classification, only the second in the history of the FDA. This is the Brainport V100. This is for essentially blind patients, profoundly non-seeing or profoundly blind patients. The glasses convert the visual world into a tactile stimulus that goes onto that wafer which they put in their mouth and stimulates their tongue. And this gives these patients ambulatory vision, orientation vision, which for those of you who've cared for completely blind patients know that's a huge quantum leap for the patient to be able to orient to their own environment. So I think it was important from that perspective, but also because it was a de novo pathway. Now, this plot shows all de novo approvals under the FDA, over 100, but only 2 for the ophthalmic division. And I learned this morning in the breakout breakfast that 5 were submitted last year. So we will see more of these. These are essentially PMA light or 510K heavy. It's 510K with clinical, some people call it. It's a little more complex than that, and Malvina will correct me after my talk, I'm sure. But that's how I think about it. 510K heavy, PMA light. It's basically a 510K with clinicals. There are some upcoming milestones that I just want to point out. We just heard 2 days ago that Revision Optics has submitted its PMA for the raindrop corneal inlay, so this hopefully will be the second presbyopia PMA and corneal inlay. Transcend Medical, both of these we'll hear from today, has submitted its PMA to the FDA for its suprachoroidal shunt. We haven't seen any of that data. We may not see it today. We'll see when they come up. But we're all hopeful that that'll have even superior pressure reduction to the earlier first generation MIG devices. We'll see with comparable safety. That would be fantastic if it is the case. And we have another one of these 5 de novo submissions is what I'll call the Oculeave device, because I don't think it has a name. It was developed by Oculeave, which was licensed by Allergan. Basically, it's a nasal stimulator that induces reflux tearing for patients with dry eye. They currently have their pivotal study ongoing and plan to submit later this year. As we look at funding, we look at this every year. You can see that the NEI budget is essentially flat, which of course means after adjustment for inflation, it's down. It's essentially at 1999 levels. Not a great thing. But the good news, if you look at the top curve, is that venture investing is up. It's up almost 30% in the life sciences broadly. And it's also up for what we can raise when we go out to raise money, and the gap has narrowed. Narrowing that gap is important because it takes some of the risk off subsequent financing. So if you're a company that has been financed and you need money later, there perhaps is money out there to be had. If you look at ophthalmology generally, the financing has been pretty stable at about 400 to 500 million per year for a long time. That's comparable to the NEI, comparable to a large company like Alcon's annual budget. So you can see basically NEI, venture, and Alcon is a third, and then there are how many Alcon equivalents out there? The vast majority of funding for innovation, at least in our country, is non-governmental. It's private funding. You do note the small circle here. There was only one device company in ophthalmology invested in. Device companies are under a little bit of pressure, and investing in that subsector, if you will, has been down this year. We hope it will come back in subsequent years. If you look across indications within ophthalmology, you can see that it's, as we've seen in years past, AMD and glaucoma are the big 2, followed by vision correction and IOLs, and then the remaining indications pretty much as we've seen in years past. We'll have talks later about the public markets and Wall Street, as I said. We've had a great run since the Great Recession of 2008. You can see a few minor corrections. We've had a big correction recently. And the outstanding question is whether that'll translate into an even larger correction or will right itself, so to speak. And that has implications for the public offerings and to what extent they'll be available later this year and next year. I think we all know that these things run in cycles, and these cycles tend to be linked to the economy. You can see here the number of public offerings across medtech, biotech, and even ophthalmology is the small red portion, and how they correlate with recessions in the economy. Typically, a recession tends to signal and then trigger a downslide or decline in these public offerings. We don't know where 2016 is going to be, but I think we do know that there will be another cycle, at least I think I know. And if you don't trust me, you can listen to a more reputed investor, Sir John Templeton, who said the four most expensive words in the English language are, this time is different. I don't think this time will be different. Now, mergers and acquisitions, I think this has been a great time in the last year. You can see across all biotech and medtech on the top. Medtech's been pretty consistent with 46 in this last year, and biotech's seen a nice upsurge. This may in fact be the IPO effect, the so-called IPO effect, in that companies come in to acquire before things go public and become prohibitively expensive. But either way, I think it's been a great year, and it's been a really great year in ophthalmology. This is a more crowded slide than I'm often able to show at this meeting, and I'm happy to see Allergan's up here 4 times. Let's hope it stays up there, Mr. Saunders, if things change to Allergan. As they say downstairs, if you don't bet, you don't win. So I like to see all this M&A activity. I'm just going to end with a word about the developing world, and particularly India and China. There are about 7 billion people outside of North America and Europe, and they're highly innovative. And as you can see, they're now interested in ophthalmology. And I think that interest is only going to increase and expand. And so I expect to see more M&A activity like we did with Sun Pharma and Insight Vision. And I expect to see more biosimilars as we have with Intas and Cunningham. To close, I would invite you, if you haven't been, to go to the OIS website to listen to some of these podcasts. Tom Salemi, who is here, is a great interviewer. I call him Mr. Radio Voice because that's in fact what he has. If you'd like to do one of these podcasts, please reach out to me or Bill or Gil or Tom, and we'll arrange that. They're 10 minutes. They're very fun. They get about up to 400 listens per podcast, so it's a great way to reach your peers in the audience if you're so inclined. Also, I'd ask you to remember our upcoming meetings in New Orleans in May, and then next year at the AAO in Chicago.